Okay, so we continue with the our study of the Teshuvot of Rabbi Yosef Mesas in Otzar Mechtavim, and we got now to this Teshuvah here, which speaks about, a topic which is still a very, I would say, a painful topic or central topic in for observant Jews, and that's the issue of alcohol made by non-Jews. So okay, so here's this. He says, in all Morocco and Algeria, the custom is to drink arak made from non-Jewish wine, and they knew of French, Hungarian, and Ashkenazi rabbis who allowed drinking the wine made by non-Jews without supervision. This is a very powerful statement, because we have to go a little back on the origin of the prohibition. Traditionally, there was the rabbis inferred from the Torah that one is not allowed to drink wine that was libated or used in a religious service for idolatry. And then the rabbis extended the prohibition to what they called stam yanam, meaning any wine made by non-Jews, that this wine cannot be consumed by Jews, because we assume that even though we didn't see it, that the non-Jews used it for a pagan ritual. And then there was another element added, that the reason for the decree is the fear that drinking wine together would lead to mixed marriage. Now, that became a very serious problem in the 10th century in Germany. As the Jews moved to Germany, they first were imported from Italy. They were invited by the Bishop of Cologne in the 9th century to come and join him in order to boost the economy. And one of they were merchants, but one of the things that they developed when they were in Germany was the knowledge of as their knowledge as vintners. They grew vineyards and produced wine. People consumed in general tremendous amounts of wine at the time, about a gallon a day for an adult. Just think about it; it's more than what the water that some people drink today, and that's because people didn't drink water. Water were dangerous, because of some of the sources were unclean. People were not aware of hygiene, so they knew that wine is safer than water. And they had to produce really big quantities of wine. And that was when they ran into one of the problems that, as Jews living among Christians, there were many interactions that were problematic for them. That one of them, for example, is a famous one. The Talmud mentions that one is not supposed to do any commercial interaction with non-Jews 3 days prior to and 3 days after the holiday, and of course not on the holiday itself. Now, that decree was instituted in Israel at the time where Jews lived with among non-Jewish or pagan Romans and Greeks, and they had 2 or 3 festivities a year. But if you label Christianity as idolatry, which for many scholars that was the understanding, that the conception of Christianity is an idolatry, and if you consider Sunday to be a holiday, then you have a problem, because you cannot do business with the non-Jews 3 days prior to Sunday, on Sunday, and 3 days after Sunday. So you cannot do business with non-Jews, period. So this is a serious problem. And you're not big enough as a community to sustain yourself without commerce with non-Jews. Not only that, the only reason that the Jews were brought from Italy to Germany was to augment the whole business life of Germany. So now, what was the solution? The solution was the rabbis got into the discussion, and this is, as I said before, when there is a problem, there is a solution. If the rabbis do not provide a solution for a certain problem, is because they do not perceive it as a problem. They could have decided, okay, we cannot live among Christians, let us move to the Muslim world, but they did not want to do that. There was too much. There was a drastic move. So instead, they said, how can we accommodate ourselves within the Christian world? So they redefined the concept of paganism. One second. I cannot pause the recording. So they decided to redefine paganism, because they cannot lift the ban, but they could redefine paganism. So what they did was they said, let us discuss Christianity and see if it is really paganism according to the definition of the rabbis of the Talmud. And eventually they were able to come to a decision that Christianity is not paganism, meaning it is for a Jew. If a Jew practices Christianity, it's considered for him as foreign worship. But for a non-Jew to worship, to believe or practice Christianity is not considered paganism. And this way, they removed the problem. It's more complicated than that, more detailed. But basically, after they conducted this whole research, the conclusion was that, or let's put it this way, the reason they conducted the research was not in order to allow themselves to drink the wine. They produced enough wine of their own, and they could have produced it without a non-Jew touching the wine. Their concern was that because Jews manage such large quantities of wine itself became a tender. And in many cases, non-Jews who owed money to a Jew, instead of paying with money, would put a lien on a whole vineyard or the produced wine, and they would say, I owe you, let's say, 1,000 golden coins. Instead of giving you 1,000 golden coin, my whole wine production of this year is yours. And then the Jew would take this wine and sell it to someone else and get the money and collect his debt. But he would transgress by that the prohibition, because the prohibition that the rabbis put on wine was not only for drinking, it included deriving any kind of monetary or other benefit from the wine. So the rabbis in Germany, this is already in the 12th century, the 11th and 12th century, they look at that and they say, how is it possible that for hundreds of years, since the Jews settled in Germany, they conducted business and performed transactions with wine when one is not allowed to derive any benefit from wine? That they worked out this solution, claiming that Christians are not pagans, but then the conclusion, the inevitable conclusion, but also the totally unwanted conclusion was, hi Revita, welcome.
Hi, so sorry I'm late. I had a big installation in the synagogue.
No problem. We just started talking about the concept of yen nesech and stam yenam. So we're going back in history. So basically, the Balei Tosafot in the 12th century came to the conclusion that the whole prohibition of non-Jewish wine doesn't apply to Christianity. Doesn't apply to wine handled by the non-Jews. But there was an internal dialogue. They corresponded between them, Rabbeinu Tam and Rabbeinu Yitzhak HaZaken, and we could say that they sort of decided to. They decided that they will not publicize the whole. They will not publicize the full conclusion that they arrived at, meaning that you could even drink the wine, but they would rather stick to the limited allowance of conducting business with the wine. Okay, that is 11th, 12th century. Turns out that since then, we could say that people's intuition kicked into action, and they did not feel that wine touched by non-Jews should be forbidden. They didn't see, even though the Talmud speaks about paganism and you can't drink wine used by non-Jews, but they knew that unlike the reality of which the Talmud speaks, which is altars and wine libated on the altar, this doesn't exist in their time. And even though they rejected Christianity, even the same rabbis who argued that Christians are not pagans detested Christianity. I mean, if you look at the literature by the contemporaries of the Crusades and consequent generations, the way they spoke of Christianity. So they had. It is obvious that there was a dichotomy. On one hand, they said they're not pagans, and you could do commerce, commercial with their wine. On the other hand, Christianity was this detested religion that they would never practice, like the other side. Still, over time, and definitely after the Dark Ages were over and the Renaissance starts in Italy, there was a push towards allowing drinking wine made by non-Jews or touched by non-Jews. And in the 15 and 1600s, a huge debate raged in Italy and Turkey. Rabbis writing back and forth. There was a rabbi in Italy who said that it is allowed to drink the wine, and he brought all the arguments, and then many rabbis lashed out against him, and he retracted, and then they said that he didn't really retract, it was just fake, and eventually he published another statement, so they were able to sort of squash that opposition. And here comes Rabbi Meshash and says that in all Morocco and in Algeria, it was customary to drink arak made from non-Jewish wine. So if the arak is like vodka, like alcohol, and they would make it from wine or from raisins that were part of wine made by non-Jews. And also the Jews in Morocco, in Algeria, which were under French control, knew of cases of French, Hungarian, and Ashkenazi rabbis who allowed drinking wine made by non-Jews without supervision. And he explains why. The reason is that the biblical prohibition is against wine used directly for pagan rituals. The rabbis added offense and forbade any wine. But that decree was only valid when paganism was common. In our days, not only there's no paganism, it's also clear that it is not going to reappear in the future. This is an important statement that Rabbi Meshash makes. It's important because whenever you have a discussion or a dialogue with traditional rabbis within the Orthodox community about lifting a decree that was made in the past, they say, but what if we return to the situation that existed before? For example, if you ask, why are we still celebrating 2 days of the holiday when the whole reason for doing 2 days is the inability to inform communities outside Eretz Israel of the exact days of the calendar, and now we have a calendar and we have advanced means of communication. We can send messages. We just saw the Cassini crashing into Saturn. Was this tremendous distance? How can one even imagine that we're going to go back to a situation where we have no communication? The same thing Rabbi Meshash says here. The world has progressed slowly from deep paganism to modern religions that do not practice paganism through the spread of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And now he goes on to say, even if you want to avoid the wine, arak and vinegar made from it are kosher. For the same reason, one should not be concerned about Halav Israel. So I'll explain all this, and as we go to the text of the Teshuvah, and that is in Siman Taf Nun Dalid 454 in volume 1 of Otzar Michtavim. So he writes this: Ve'al inyan mayim srufim, literally burnt water. So that is how they meant the process of distillation is that you boil the liquids and you take just the alcohol that is being distilled from it. Katav Kvod Torato. He's writing, by the way, to a rabbi called Avner Tzarfati of Fez, who was one of the leaders of the generation. And this Rabbi Tzarfati says, "Tmeha li tuva al hadrat kvodo, ech beda'ato ala davar zeh." The person who corresponds with the rabbi-messas says, "I'm very surprised at you. How did you even consider that to allow it? The me'achar shu mistam yanam vaday asur veze pashut." It's obvious that one cannot drink the arak or this alcohol made of the remnants of wine because of the prohibition of stam yanam, of neutral wine produced. Stam yanam is neutral wine. It was made by non-Jews, but not used for pagan worship. So, rabbi-messas answered, "Da yedidi, ki po machane zerah kodshenu uvechol arei Algeria, in our city, which is Meknes in Morocco, and in all the communities of Algeria." By the way, when he says all of the communities of Algeria, do you have an idea of how many communities were in Algeria at the time? There were close to 1,000 little, big and little communities in Algeria. Ka'am ka-kohen. This is based on a verse from Isaiah. The commoners as well as the priests, meaning everyone, from the religious leaders to the regular people, shotim yain saruf ana'asa mistam yanam. They all drink arak, which is made from neutral wine. Zulat shenayim shlosha gargirim hamekilim ba'isurim hamuskamim umahmirim bazeh. And here again we see the sharp whip of rabbi-messas' tongue. First of all, when he wants to refer to the few people who forbid the arak, he calls them shnayim shlosha gargirim, 2-3 grains. But this is from a verse in the prophets that says that after the destruction, gargir is not only a grain; it's also a single grape. So he says there will be shnayim shlosha gargirim berosh olel. So there will be like 2-3 grapes left in a cluster. So he speaks of wine and he calls the few people who don't drink from the wine the few grapes left from the cluster. So the double entendre here. But then he goes. This is an observation that he makes in several places. When he sees people that claim to be more rigorous in their observance, he says this: "Mekilim ba'isurim hamuskamim umahmirim bazeh." Those are people who disregard other prohibitions that are accepted by the majority of people, but they decide to be strict with this one. So, in other words, he says that maybe it's easy for them to do it, and they wear this crown or halo of holier than thou. So he says, why do we allow to drink the wine? It says, Ishtarbuvei ishtarbav me'are Tzarfat. It is an influence of the cities of France. Asher kol hakahal im chachmehem v'sofrehem v'rabbanehem Shotim stam yenam lirvaya. Everyone, note, the people with their scholars, their scribes, and the rabbis drink wine made by non-Jews. Lirvaya, meaning, and they enjoy it. V'chen katav, meaning, when he says lirvaya, he means they're not forced. Nobody puts a gun to their head and says, drink that wine or I'll kill you. So it's done voluntarily. V'chen katav harav hagaon kemorach b'laich zal b'psak echad. He quotes a rabbi from Algeria who lived about a generation before him, Rabbi Haim Ovadia. One second. Okay. So he quotes Rabbi Ovadia. I'm sure that if you ask most yeshiva students today, who was Rabbi Haim Ovadia, they wouldn't know that. Was a rabbi from Algeria that was well known there, and he was considered a great posek, a great halachic decisor. And this is what he writes: it's like וידוע שרבני צרפת הראשונים זיכרונם לברכה הקילו הרבה בסתם ינם. So he says, it's not modern France. If you could say, because when you read that, you say, oh, France in the 19th century, 20th century, we're talking after the emancipation, maybe all those other rabbis, the consistoire. No, he's speaking about a tradition that was maybe for a while a well-kept secret in France, but they attributed it to Rabbanei Tzarfat HaRishonim. Rabbanei Tzarfat HaRishonim are the rabbis that I spoke about before, Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, even though I'm referring to them as German, but they lived on the border in Alsace-Lorraine, so they are both French and German. And so Rabbeinu Tam was considered Tzarfati, and they were very lenient with Stam Yanam. So he has this tradition. And he quotes another book, Otzar Yisrael's Encyclopedia of Halakha, and he quotes none other than the Rema, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who wrote the commentary or the addition to the Shulchan Aruch, and is considered the leading posek for the Ashkenazi world. Yadua Askamat Rema v'chol haposkim ha'achronim. It is known that Rabbi Moshe Isserles and all others agreed, Yain stam bazman hazeh yesh letzadeh betachlit hakulot, that we have to follow all lenient opinions in our days. And why is that? The akum bazman hazeh kekatan ben yomo. The non-Jews of today are considered are no different than children, meaning that we do not consider their faith to be a pagan one. I mean, even though it has pagan elements, regarding those elements, they are like children. Just as, if you talk to a Jewish child and a Christian child and a Muslim child, they know what they practice. They know whether they go to the shul, to the mosque, or to the church, but they cannot speak about ideology or philosophy or theology. So when he says that akum b'yamenu katan ben yomo, meaning they are not steeped in the theology of their religion, they just do it as a routine. Gam bizmanhem, even back then, he says, he quotes the Yerushalmi, the Talmud, en medakdekin beyayin nesech. If you have doubt whether this wine was touched or not touched by non-Jews, you're not medakdek, you don't conduct further research. And he quotes another rabbi, also Ashkenazi, Rabbi Mintz, Rabbi Huda Mintz, who lived in Italy for a while. That whenever there is a reason to doubt the problem of Yain Nesech, we rely on it. And he finds another source, also from Rabbi Ovadia, who commented on the Shulchan Aruch. Hitir lishtot stam yenam ba'al nezilut letzorach refuah af shu holi shel me'unagim. That word nezilut, we don't use it today. The word is nazelet, or common cold or runny nose, and basically they allowed to drink wine if you have a cold and the only wine available is non-kosher or neutral wine produced by non-Jews, the even though this is not a disease or a sickness that would cause people to be bedridden, still they allowed it. And he quotes another rabbi, Rabbeinu Meir Av Bedin Dekilat Kodesh Eisenstadt Bimdinot Ungarin Maharam Ash. It was called Maharam Ash. Is a student and disciple of Hatam Sofer, also had this lenient opinion. He quotes also Rabbi Asabag from Algeria that testifies that he saw local rabbis and Ashkenazi rabbis that follow that they say it's allowed. So now I'm not going to go into all the details of his discussion about the arak, which Rabbi Yosef Karo refers to as agua ardiente. Like as so mayim sulfim, agua is water, ardiente in Spanish is boiling, and in Colombia they say called aguardiente in one word. It's kind of the local arak or uzo. So he quotes that, and he shows that there's a long discussion whether this is allowed or forbidden, and then he concludes with this: עוד נוכל לומר שרבותינו האוסרים לא פלגי המתירים אלא בזמניהם שהייתה עבודה זרה מצויה. Meaning, now we'll look at a debate that took place 200-300 years ago, or if we look at the crucial periods of that prohibition, and that is an extremely important, as I said before, observation to the analysis of Halakha, which is we cannot take as a block or as a contained unit an argument that was made 1,500 years ago or 700 years ago or 300 years ago and apply it as is to today's reality. We have to look at the transitions and the changes in world culture, in our culture, in medical research, etc. So, like I said, the first statement was made about 1,800 years ago in the time of the Mishnah when the decree was made. Another argument was made 800 years ago in the time of Baalei Tosafot in France and Germany. Another argument was made in the 1500s where there was a debate. And now Rabbi Yosef Messas in the 20th century says this only applies bizmanam she'ayta avodah zara metzuya. Back then, paganism was a more common thing. Nowadays, most of us do not run into pagans, and even if we do not get wine from them. Try to think of the last time that you have procured a bottle of wine from an idol worshipper, right? This is what he says. בזמן הזה, כולם יודו להתיר את הזיעה. In our days, they would all agree that even if the wine is also the zi'ah, meaning the distilled alcohol, is allowed. Now, another argument. People say, "Af de batala ta'am, lo batla gzira." Some people argue that when the rabbis made a decree for a certain reason, even if the reason has gone or is no longer applicable, the decree is still there. So he answers, "Hainu dafka bizmanehim, she'af shayu arbe umot shelo hayu ovdim avodah zara kmo הישמעאלים, מכל מקום נמצאו אומות אחרים שהיו עובדים עבודה זרה, ולכן גזרוה עטוה." So he says, when this statement was made, it was made by Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Sheshat of Algeria. When he said the reason has disappeared, but the decree is still there, it's only because there are still pagans in the world. It says the Muslims are not pagans, but there are many others who are. אבל בזמן הזה דלקה למחש למידי לחשינן. It says, but today paganism is really almost extinct. And even if you want to say it's forbidden, just forbid the wine and not the distilled alcohol. In addition, he says, what is the reason I mean, he comes from a rational perspective. Why would I say that if I made a decree because of a certain fear, but that fear no longer exists, that the decree would still be there? Only because I'm concerned that the situation will return to what it was before. For example, the driver of a coach, before there were cars, the driver of the coach used to sit on the right side of the coach. Why? So, in the case of an attack, he would be able to easily draw the sword. If he sits on the left, is it true? Yeah, in the car. Yeah. If he sits on the left, when he tries to draw the sword, it will be blocked by the person sitting next to him. So he would sit on the right. Now, even when cars were invented, I guess in some places they still were afraid of cars being attacked by robbers, and you have to draw your sword. We don't go around with swords anymore, right? Most people. And you could see the difference between driving in America and driving in England. That where it still remained driving, the driver sits on the right. So here is one community that said, that's it, the old reason has gone, let's adapt to the new world. And the community that said, no, we don't change the past, even though they know they will never go back to what it was before. So, אבל he says this, אבל העניין זה דבר ברור לכל הוא שלא תחזור עבודה זרה לעולם בשום זמן ובשום אופן. This is a very courageous statement that says it's obvious to all that paganism will never return. כי כל באי העולם הכירו את הבורא ברוך הוא. It says everybody now knows and understands the concept of God, or that divine entity which is removed from the world. And it's interesting because in a way this statement, if you move ahead 100 years, we don't see paganism. What we could see is people questioning any gods or any deities, but you don't see among educated people the idea that there are there's a pantheon of gods. Each one of them controls a different aspect of nature. So rabbi-messas, based on his study of history, is able to make this assessment. So this is important. This is how you study halakha within the parameters of history. And he says, "V'im ken hazar din ze kedin gilui delo shayach bazman hazeh." So he says, now this halakha of yen nesech, of the forbidden wine, is just like the law of gilui. What is gilui? The rabbis made a decree. Again, they made a lot of decrees. One of them was not to drink any liquids that were left uncovered throughout the night. And that included, by the way, cheese. Probably the reason that they said that you cannot eat cheese that was made by non-Jews was that the cheese in its liquid form would stay outside all night. What was the concern then? The concern was that a poisonous snake drank from the liquid and left poison in it. So rabbi-messas says, "Af shu milta de sakanta, de hamira mikol isur hamur." Even though this is not a question of a prohibition, meaning of a religious prohibition, but rather a question of protecting your health, which is more important than keeping religious prohibitions. We don't live now in our homes. There are no snakes are not common, so there's no concern. וכן, now we have another halakha. חלב שחלבו גוי ואין ישראל רואה שהוא אסור. The rabbi made a decree that if a non-Jew produced milking any animal, without the Jew observing him, the Jew is not allowed to drink from the milk. But why is that? it is because there's a fear that the non-Jew mixed non-kosher milk in the kosher milk. But now everybody holds that it's allowed. And why is that? Because non-kosher milk is just not common. In America, there are no commercial production of non-kosher milk. The only animals that could produce milk and are non-kosher would be horses, camels, and pigs, and maybe llamas. Now there are llamas and alpacas in America. No one in his right mind who owns a herd of llamas or alpacas or camels or horses will try to milk them and mix that milk, non-kosher milk, in cow milk in order to cause a random Jew to drink non-kosher milk. Because federal regulations will come so hard on that person, and the fine will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not worth it to try to deceive. So there's no incentive, there's no reality, there's no incentive for deception, so there's no concern. So once we are certain that the prohibition will never return, this is removed. There are many other halachot that has changed as the situation has changed. It says if you want to be strict and to say that you cannot use the wine, so don't drink the wine, but do not forbid the arak or uzo or any other alcoholic product that is distilled from it. And he says, I cannot speak more right now. You're a wise man and you'll understand what I said. So I think this is, in just touching this subject with such sincerity and honesty and clarity, it just shows us the willingness of rabbi-messas to argue for the people when he believed that what they did was not forbidden. Not to say that he was always in favor of what people did, but when he thought that there is room to defend it, he did it without doubt. So let me just say that this issue of non-kosher wine has become, in the last, I would say, 50 years, and it's part of the kashrut business being commercialized and institutionalized. It's controlled by the Orthodox Union, by other kashrut organizations, and it became part of the labeling of communities, meaning that if you as an individual drink wine out, you already don't belong within the Frum or the Orthodox community. I even I had once, I mean, not I had, like, there's a very educated, very learned woman that we know who's a convert, and she's what you call Frum Orthodox. She wears not only because of her dress code and the hair covering, but all of her lifestyle and observance, etc. And she told me how she was invited for Shabbat meals by Orthodox people who were very nice to her, very welcoming to her, but when a bottle of wine was opened on the table, they made sure to cover it with aluminum foil, so because they were afraid that her touch will turn it into yen nesech, wine touched by a pagan. So very subtly they communicated to her that for us you're still not Jewish, and that if you touch the wine, we're afraid maybe we cannot drink from it. And there were other rabbis who also promoted the idea that someone who's not shomer Shabbat, someone who's not observant, he is like a non-Jew, that and if he touches the wine, you cannot drink from the wine. I just spoke with someone who told me, last week, that he had an event where he served wine, and in order to prevent the wine today, after all the, like I said, the campaign for the kosher wine, etc., in order to make sure that the wine does not turn into yen nesech, into non-kosher wine, the wine is boiled in the factories or heated to a certain temperature, then this grants it the status of yain mevushal, cooked wine, even though it is not cooked. It's pasteurized, just heated to a certain temperature. And why does it help? Because the assumption is that the non-Jews, the pagans, do not use cooked wine to libate upon the altar. And this is, by the way, one of those kashrut labels that is never translated to English. I mean, you'll never see on a bottle of kosher wine the word cooked wine. They will write mevushal in Hebrew, and in English it will say mevushal, mevushal. The non-Jew who looks at it, if he doesn't know the whole history, for him it's just another technical term, because nobody would, if it would say cooked, nobody would want to buy the wine, right? So then my friend told me that in an event that he had, he bought non-mevushal wine, meaning the wine that was susceptible, according to that strict halakha, to become yenesech if touched or looked on by a non-Jew or someone who's not Shabbat observing. And he tells me that one of his friends did him the favor, and to protect him from transgressing the prohibition, poured down the sink 15 bottles of very expensive wine. And he was very, very upset. And this is the problem of outright destruction of property and theft. But the person who did that would defend himself. No, what do you mean? It's not kosher. I was saving his soul and the soul of his guests from consuming non-kosher. So when we know how many wars raged around that topic, when we can appreciate the courage and honesty of rabbi-messas in defending this halakha. I think this is an indicator. We have a serious problem of polarization within the Jewish people between different factions. It was originally between the Orthodox and the Reform, and then the conservative joined, and then Reconstructionist, and then within the Orthodox you split into modern Orthodox and liberal and ultra-Orthodox and open Orthodoxy. But within all that menagerie, really, of different religious beliefs and standards, when you seek something kosher, what do you get? Let's say that you wanted to buy, let's say you want to go and visit friends that you know are kosher, right? And you'll go to the store to buy a bottle of wine. The only kosher that you will find is the one that demands what they think are the highest standards of kashrut. There's no alternative. The conservative or reform movement, or the open Orthodox, modern Orthodox, liberal Orthodox, never bothered to create an equivalent or a competitive system of kashrut that will be able to provide to people who say, I want to keep kashrut, but not with crazy standards. Is there something else that you can offer? Is it possible to buy a bottle of good wine for $3 or $4 instead of $7 or $10 or $8 or more? Nobody does that. I personally had an offer a while ago when I lived in LA to supervise a line of kosher wine in a winery in Australia, very big winery, and I declined. I declined because I told my friend who came with the idea. I said, what am I going to do if I'm going to do the kashrut according to the standards of the OU? I will have to fly to Australia, and you'll have to pay my expenses, and I'll have to go and look at the factory and pretend that because of my supervision, the wine is now kosher. This will be deception. I will be taking money from you in an unjustified fashion, and I cannot do that. If, however, I will tell you to put my seal of approval on the wine because it is kosher as it is now, the OU will come and dig into my history and my writing and my teachings and everything in order to discredit me, and I don't want to do that. Now, even according to the standards of the OU or the more strict opinions that rabbi-messas mentions here, there really should be no reason that the wine produced in the big wineries would be considered non-kosher. I mean, today they put the label on it, but think about it for a second. What was the concern of the original decree about the wine? They were afraid that a pagan would touch the wine. So first of all the rabbis or other generations said they are not pagans, right? And most wine is produced in Christian countries today. Secondly, nobody touches the wine. Nobody touches the wine because everything is automated. When we talk about the big wineries, there are huge trucks. The wine is made in containers under atmospheric pressure. Nobody could touch it. Nobody could open it. It's all automated. But this is the problem that we have. I mean, in terms of practical halakha, what it would miss today is the ability for non-Orthodox or non-ultra-Orthodox Jews to identify with a certain brand of kashrut or some kind of reassurance in consumption that takes into account other possibilities and does not want to push everything to an extreme. So I think this in itself is enough for that discussion, and we'll stop here, and we'll pick up with the halachot, the other laws that we have here, the next halachot in the Shulchan Aruch, which speaks about the validity of the arguments in the Talmud, and that also shows us the wide spectrum of rabbi-messas discussion. So we'll stop here for now.